Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Kuftes Vav continues discussing the halachas of the Pesach Seder, beginning with when you say the bracha on the karpas and the maror, when you say hadama, when you say the bracha of al-chilaz maror. We then go into the halachas of korech, whether we're supposed to eat the matzah and the maror like Hillel or like the Rabbanan. Gemara will discuss the issue and explain it. Then the Gemara gets into the halacha of washing, rachta and orchatz, why we have to wash twice, and what situations do you have to wash twice. The Gemara will then continue into the discussion of removing the ka'ara, who has the ka'ara, when is it removed, and who is it removed from, and then the Gemara will explain the meaning of the term lechem oini. So first of all, we had seen earlier that you could use maror for your actual karpas. In that case, you could say the bracha of bar pri adama and al-chilas maror in the beginning before the first time when you're eating a karpas, and that could work for both the karpas and for the maror itself. So the Gemara says, do you do that or not? The Gemara says it's a machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Rav Huna says, no, you say the bracha of hadama before the karpas, and you say achilas maror when you're ready to be at the mitzvah of maror after matzah. Rav Chisda says, no, you don't do it like that. How could you fill yourself up on maror and then go make the bracha of achilas maror later? So you say both brachas in the beginning before the karpas itself. Now, how are we going to pass in our halacha l'maisa? So the Gemara says that in Surya they did like Rav Huna, and Rav Sheshes, Rav Yeshua did like Rav Chisda. What should he do lahalacha? The Gemara says the halacha is like Rav Chisda, but Rav Acha Breda Rava, he tried to avoid the problem. And in order to avoid the entire issue altogether, he didn't use maror for karpas. There, everybody will agree that you cannot say the bracha of al-chilaz maror because you're not eating maror the first time. So the first thing you eat, let's say you eat some other vegetable, there you could say hadama. That hadama works for the maror you can eat later as well. You can't say al-chilaz maror because you're not eating maror. Then when you get to the maror, then you say the bracha of al-chilaz maror. That would avoid the machlokes altogether. Now we go to the discussion of korech, and that's, do you eat the matzah and maror together or not? So later the Gemara will bring in that some machlokes between Hillel and the Rabbanan. Hillel the Tana and the Rabbanan. The Gemara wants to say the machlokes is based on the question of, are mitzvos mevatles zu as zu or not? When you have two things together and you only taste one of them, or one taste overrides the other one, so it's kind of mevatel, the first one. You don't really feel it. It's not really counted as if you do anything at all. Now the matzah and the maror are both mitzvos. So according to Hillel, you could eat them all together, and we would say mitzvahs ein mevatlin zu azu. They don't mevatel each other. They don't cancel each other out. You're doing them all, and that's what Hillel says in the times of the Beis Hamikdash they would eat Pesach, matzah, and maror all together as one. Mitzvahs don't mevatel each other. Says it Rav Yochanan, the Rabbanan disagree with that, and they say that you do not have to eat the matzah, the maror, or if it's the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the carbon Pesach, you don't have to eat them all at once in one sandwich. You could eat them separately. So the Gemara wants to say, Rav Yochanan says that's because they hold the mitzvahs are mevatlin zu azu. They would cancel each other out. The Gemara says if that would be the reason, then why would they say you don't have to eat them together? They should say that you're not allowed to eat them together. The source we have is that they say that the pasuk says al matzos u'merim yochluhu, you should eat it, which implies you eat each one separately, but the Brisa says, and therefore you don't have to eat them together as one, but you should say you're not allowed to. So the reason is not necessarily therefore because of mitzvah saying mevatlin zu azu. It's just a question of what the proper halacha is, how you're supposed to do the mitzvah. Should they be eaten together or not? And you may think that they have to be eaten together, like Hillel comes along there, but it says they don't have to be eaten together. Now the Gemara quotes the Amora Hillel, who says that in our days you definitely shouldn't eat them together, because even according to Hillel, who holds the mitzvahs are not mevatel zu azu, that is in the days of the Beis Hamikdash when they're all daraisa. But in our days, mar is only derabanan, as we shall see much later in the Masechta. If mar is only derabanan, then as far on a daraisa level, you don't have two mitzvahs here. You only have matzah, and then mar is not even a mitzvah on a daraisa level. So therefore, the mar could be mevatel the matzah. And therefore you shouldn't eat them together at all. Now, halacha l'maisa, we don't have a psak, and therefore the Gemara says we do both. We do like Hillel, and we do like the Rabbanan. We want to be able to get all the mitzvahs separately. So what we do is as follows. We eat matzah with a bracha of achilas matzah. We eat maror separately with a bracha of achilas maror. And then we eat them together in order to fulfill Hillel's opinion that they're supposed to be eaten together. It's all zeicher l'mikdash. Just a question of, is it zeicher l'mikdash like Hillel or zeicher l'mikdash like the Rabbanan when they are separate? Okay, now onto the subject of washing. So we know we wash twice during the Seder, once for each time we dip vegetable in liquids. What's the reason for that? So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Elazar, says in Ibn Aishia, anytime you eat a wet vegetable, you have to wash for it. The reason is because the Rabbanan were matakein that your hands are shnios l'tuma, they're a secondary level of tuma, and that's why you have to wash when you touch bread, gzeira, that any bread has the halacha of truma. We give it the halacha of truma so that kahanim will eat all their bread with kedushas truma, and therefore when they are eating actual truma, they will not end up being metameit. The halacha is that hands which are shnios are metame truma. Truma is a high enough level of kedusha to become tame from hands. But there's also gzeir derbanan that shnios, secondary tama, is metame any liquid. So if you have any vegetable that has liquid on it, the hands will be metame that liquid, and then go ahead and be metame the vegetable. That tame liquid midrabanan becomes actually a rishon l'tama. I can go ahead and be metame the vegetable. Anyway, so that's why you have to wash your hands. But over here, the Gemara wants to say this is the reason why you have to wash your hands twice during the Suda, because you're eating wet vegetables. And you can see that from the fact that, and the Gemara adds, you can see from that fact that when you put the maror in the charos, you have to dip it all the way in. You have to slather it on it, because otherwise, what's the problem? Why do you have to wash? You're just going to hold it on one end and you'll dip in the other end. Your hand will never touch the liquid. Charos is there. Where it says not necessarily. It could be that you don't have to slather it all on. We are just concerned that you may end up slathering it all on, and therefore you may end up in a situation where you'll be metame the charosas and metame the vegetable with your hands that are shnios. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, a person should not keep the charosas on the mar. Shouldn't keep the mar in the charosas, because the strength of the liquid of the charosas, which has a acidity in it from the apple, can actually counteract and be mevatel. It can destroy the acidity of the maror, and you'll end up with no maror flavor, and you obviously have to have maror flavor. That's part of the mitzvah of eating maror. You should have the taste of maror in your mouth. Okay, the Gemara goes further and says, a quote, it brings of Chizda, who told Rabbana Ukva that you have to wash your hands twice. If you eat vegetables that are wet 2 times, you have to wash your hands twice. The Gemara says that this was said in front of Rav Papa, and the Rabbanan want to say that this is referring to other situations, not by the Seder. Other situations you have to wash your hands twice. By the Seder, you don't have to wash your hands twice, because you already washed your hand the first one. Why do you have to wash your hand before the second one? So Rav Papa said, how would that make sense anywhere else? Rav Papa said, no, the opposite is true. Only by the Seder do you have to wash your hands twice, but elsewhere, if you wash your hands the first time, you don't have to wash your hands the second time, because you already washed it the first time. So Gemara says, well, what's the logic in that? How does that help at all? Here also, you wash the hands for the first time. Why should you have to wash it for the second time? So Gemara says, what the Papa means to say is as follows. Since you're washing your hands once, and then you're saying a whole long Haggadah, and the Haggadah is going to occupy your attention, you're not paying attention to where you put your hands. You may end up being metame your hands, and therefore you should wash again when you dip vegetables after the Haggadah. But generally, if you eat 2 vegetable dips twice, you don't necessarily have to wash your hands separately for each one. Okay, now we go to the actual halachas of the eating of the matzah and the maror. Eating matzah, there's only the halacha that it has to be eaten. There is no other din involved. Anything that counts as eating fulfills the mitzvah. Maror, however, it's not just eating. You have to do some activity that qualifies as eating and also gets you the taste of the maror in your mouth. What case are we interested in here? What if you swallow it without chewing? So Gemara says it counts as eating, and therefore you're yotze matzah, but although it counts as eating, that's not enough for maror. You also have to have the flavor, and if you just swallow it in one gulp without chewing it, you wouldn't get the flavor of the maror, you wouldn't get the taste of the maror, and therefore you're not yotze with that. If you wrap up the matzah and the maror together and swallow that in one gulp, so you're yotze matzah, but you're not yotze the maror. However, if you wrap that entire mixture in some other creation, like the Gemara says there's a cloth-like material that grows around the tree, if you wrap it in that and swallow that in one shot, that doesn't count as anything, because the matzah and the maror don't even touch your throat. It's wrapped up in this thing. It doesn't count as an achila. This is a halacha that comes into play when taking a gel cap that involves treif food, if you wrap it in a tissue, it's not considered an eating. It may be permitted for a situation of medical need. Okay, now the Gemara quotes a machlokas, who has all the items of the Seder in front of him. Is it everybody, or is it just the person who's leading the Seder himself? So the Gemara says that Rav Simi Barashi said everybody gets their own Seder plate. Now, in the times of Chazal, everybody had their own small table. It was like school. You had your table in front of you, and everybody had their own. So everybody had all the items laid out on his table. He had the matzah, he had the maror, he had the charoises, he had the dips, whatever he needs. Rav Huna says, no, only the one who's leading the Seder has to have all these things. Now today we have one large table that everybody sits at, but it's the ka'ara that we're referring to here that has each of the items that are needed for the Seder before each individual. The Gemara says, the halachas of Rav Huna, only the one who's leading has to have the Seder plate himself. Now, one of the things we do is we remove the Seder plate when we start the Haggadah, and the reason is so that the children should ask, why are you taking the table away? We didn't even eat yet. Gemara brings an incident when Abai was a child and he was attending the Seder run by Rabbah, and they took the table away. Abai said, hey, what are you doing? You're taking the table away. We didn't even eat anything yet. Rabbah said, oh, very good. Now we don't have to say Manashtan anymore because you already asked the question automatically. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the meaning of the term lechem oini, which we say in the Haggadah. Shmuel says lechem oini is from the word oinin, meaning to say. This is bread that we say a lot of things over. We say a whole long Haggadah over it. Another pshat, the Gemara says, first of all, we have a brisa that says just like Shmuel pshat. Then we have another pshat that says it's from the word ani. It's poor man's bread, and that's why we make the bracha of achilas matzah over a broken piece. That's the middle piece that we break during Yachatz. The Gemara says another reason why it should be called poor man's bread is because you bake it quickly. You don't first make the dough, then go build a fire in the oven. You make it fast. When a poor man bakes bread, he also does it quickly. He doesn't want the heat to run out. Doesn't have enough wood for the fire for a long time. So while his wife is mixing up the dough, he's already lighting the fire. And as soon as the dough is ready, it's ready to go in. The fire is already lit, and it goes in and out.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.